Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
So, as we go through the Browns coaching search, we're learning more and more about what the Browns process for this head coaching search looks like. And I think we're finding out some interesting details. Earlier today on the Rich Eisen show, Tom Pelissero, a NFL insider, was on to talk about how the Browns operate. And it turns out that the Browns operate in a unique way. Now, keep in mind, we've dealt with this before, right? Because we are the Browns, and the Browns do not have a track record of success, and people are used to laughing at the Browns. If the Browns do anything different, people will interpret it negatively. What I want to do is try to look at just the process of what the Browns are doing based on what Tom's saying, and evaluate it not just through the lens of, oh, the Browns are doing this, but how would people react to it if an organization like the Baltimore Ravens or the Pittsburgh Steelers were doing something along those lines, instead of just kind of cloaking it in LOL Browns bad without actually trying to engage with what's being said. So let's jump into it. Tom Pelissero telling us how the Browns head coach process and head coach search works out.
They have run a number of times. I would just say this. The Browns search process and interview process, which they have run a number of times, is unlike any other in the NFL. And it plays to certain types of candidates. They are a data-driven operation in Cleveland. And so they spend an extraordinary amount of time gathering data on their coaching candidates. You're talking about taking a personality test. You're talking about writing an essay. You're talking about completing homework assignments going into both the first and the second rounds of interviews. It plays toward the types of candidates that they have in the mix, which is...
So the thing that he said there that's going to get a lot of people's attention is the homework assignments, right? A personality test before a job interview is not unheard of. You know, a place trying to get data on you before you interview, that happens. I mean, I remember when I was in college interviewing to try to be a resident assistant. There was multiple rounds of interviews. There were assignments that you would have to do in between interviews, recommendations that you would have to get, presentations you would have to do. Like job interviews aren't always show up, sit here, bullshit a couple of questions, and then maybe get the job. Like a lot of job interviews, especially for jobs that would hopefully pay more but have more responsibility, usually require some element of extra work in there, because what a organization is trying to do, or at least what the goal is supposed to be when you're being interviewed for a job, is they're trying to simulate a environment that you will be acting in regularly and trying to see how you would react to see if you're right for the job. You know, so the idea of the Browns saying, hey, this is how we run our team. We're very data driven. You're going to have to kind of communicate with the analytics department, with the data people in the organization. And there are things that we want from a head coach to be able to handle in those spots. I don't really think that's a huge problem. Like to me, it seems like the Browns are very specific in what they want and what they're looking for, and they're trying to find exactly what they're looking for. Are there trade-offs to this? Obviously, yes, there are trade-offs to this, right? If you are operating like this, which is having, more strict requirements for your interview, you're going to cut down the pool of candidates that you're going to be able to select from. Now, some people see that as a bad thing. Some people might see that as an opportunity, right? Maybe the Browns view this as a way to trim the fat in the job interview process. Guys who aren't going to be okay with the amount of work that the job requires, guys who don't want to interact with certain departments in the organization, people who aren't going to buy in to what the Browns are doing, are probably not going to be willing to do the work, and they're probably going to drop out the interview process. Some people see that as a negative. I can see from their perspective where they're saying, hey, we're trimming the fat. That guy didn't fit. So I know because it's the Browns, everybody, including Browns fans, are going to find a way to view this in the most negative light possible. But I really don't think that this is the strangest thing in the world. Is it different? Yeah, this is different. This is a departure from how other teams find coaches. I will say this, though. I've watched the Browns interview coaches in the same exact manner that everybody else has been doing before, and it lead to bad results. So it's not like the other way of doing it is foolproof, right? So if it's not foolproof, right, if the other way of doing it can lead to you hiring Freddie Kitchens and Hugh Jackson, which is the traditional way of just let a guy show up, interview, maybe a presentation here or there. If that process can land you Freddie Kitchens or Hugh Jackson, then it's not like there's a lot of downside to changing up the process. Like, okay, you can have a terrible coach if you do it the traditional way. You could do it the different way, and it might blow up in your face and you get a terrible coach. Or you might get exactly what you're looking for. Tom refers to this earlier where he says the Browns have done this before. And if you look at some of the hires that they've made through this process, you have to imagine, since Jim Schwartz was hired through Andrew Berry, that this was a similar process that Jim Schwartz went through when he took the defensive coordinator job. You have to go back to Dee Podesta when they hired Kevin Stefanski, which was a solid hire. And then you have to go back to when they wanted Sean McDermott over Hugh Jackson because of this kind of process stuff. So I don't really see the big problem with it. I get it that people are going to have a bit of a reaction to it because it is unusual, or at least it's different for the NFL space. You know what I mean? I don't think it's unusual to have heavy requirements in between interviews for certain jobs, because certain jobs, certain jobs are really important that you don't fuck up, right? Like there are jobs where it's like, hey man, if you mess up, things go real bad, right? So those jobs have intense interview processes. Now, obviously, the Browns job isn't like, working a nuclear reactor or something like that, where you got to really make sure people know what they're doing. But I don't really think it's a bad idea to switch up how you look for coaches, especially if you're, operating differently than other teams. Now we can argue about whether if the Browns operating this way has been a successful model for them, and if they should just give up on this entirely, which is how they've ran the organization, basically going back to, it's really started in the Kevin Andrew era where there wasn't any interruption, but they tried to make this happen all the way back 10 years ago. So there's a bigger argument to have here. How much should analytics be involved? Obviously, analytics is involved at every job in the NFL. Every NFL team has an analytics department in some way, shape, or form. The question is how involved should analytics be? Obviously, the Browns are on the stronger part of the spectrum, along with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? It's kind of where the Browns get this model from. We'll see if that works out for Cleveland. But let's continue to listen to this video to hear more about what's going on.
Very, very smart people in a lot of cases that just often happen to be tall, thin guys who came from Ivy League schools, so that's certainly not a requirement. That's the type of candidate generally that is going to fit into a data-driven environment. So
there's a written test. There's a written test, huh? Really? They want you to write an essay? This is why I want to be the coach of the Cleveland Browns, or
questionnaires, a multi-part essay, a personality test, and then additional homework assignments if you get through the first round to get into the second round. Which you can imagine then.
The answer can't be Google me? You can't go Signetti? I know I'm being flippant, Tom, but that to me, I don't know. You're hopping around the country, interviewing for jobs, kids, spouses, boxes
You
being
could
packed because
imagine-
you've hit the road and you're going to sit down and write an essay. You know,
You
like
could imagine then when certain candidates decide not to follow
Yeah.
through on interviews, part of it may be that it's more than just show up in a nice suit and answer questions in the room. And that speaks to how the Browns organization operates. Paul
Okay.
D.
All right. So, I think it's interesting that Rich is like kind of advocating for the Browns to be lazy here, right? Like, I think it's fine that the Browns are going to require people who want to take a very important position in the organization, right? Head coach is one of the most powerful positions in a football organization. Sometimes it's number 2 in the organization. It could be number 3 in this structure of the organization. It's a top 3 spot in the Cleveland Browns organization, is my point. And no, it shouldn't be up to like, oh, just Google him. The Browns shouldn't be that lazy with the process. And yeah, I'm sorry if you want to take a super important role at a giant company, if you want to become a CFO or a CEO or a COO at a big company, a nationwide corporation, that interview process is going to be very time consuming. Like, you think that they hire a CEO at Apple by just like doing one round of interviews, checking the vibes, and everybody being like, yeah, let's hire that guy. That's not how that goes, right? I think the Browns view this in a bit of a corporate kind of way, which I think has its downfalls. And I talked about it before, right? This is why I feel like the Browns are so terrible with fan engagement. This is why I feel like the Browns are so secretive for no reason. And I do think that the Browns are implementing a lot of bureaucracy. And I do think the Browns run the risk of implementing so much bureaucracy that it gets in the way of just plain old common sense decision making, which are all, I think, fair arguments. And I think there's evidence that, hey, this has sometimes played itself out. How many times have you been like, hey, the Browns really need to stop doing this thing? It's pretty obvious, but it takes like 3 weeks. There's like a lag there. That lag is usually the bureaucracy in the organization. So there's something certainly to that, right? I don't want to print this as, oh, it's amazing, but I do get why, if you operate like the Browns, it would make sense to go that way. And honestly, I get why, if you're interviewing for a head coach for an NFL team, you would want to be very thorough. I don't imagine that the other teams, by the way, are just show up in a suit and interview. Like, that would be crazy. Like, I've been an adult. Like, I don't know about y'all. I have not really interviewed for a ton of jobs because I landed on this as my full-time job when I was like 25. But even in that little bit of time, the only jobs I've ever done a show up in a polo or a business casual thing and interview once and then you get the job kind of situation has been like when I was like a teenager and I was interviewing for like fast food restaurants, right? And those are low paying jobs that are very replaceable. So it doesn't really matter who you hire, right? And that interview process reflects that. But any job where I've been getting any responsibility or any hiring committee I've been a part of, where I've been given where there's like a large amount of responsibility for somebody about to get a job, those interviews take a lot of work. Hell, like, again, I brought this up. Like, I was a resident assistant in college. That's not even that much power. It was like 3 rounds of interviews. And then you had to re-interview for like 2 more rounds every year to maintain your job because you're given a decent amount of authority as a resident assistant. And they want to make sure you're not abusing it and that you're a good psychological fit for the position. And that's just being an RA. That's just so the university can pay for my housing and give me a little cash on the side. You know what I mean? When I was in my capacity as a resident assistant, when I assisted the department in being a part of the hiring committee for the director of housing. Now, that's an actual big boy position in a university. That process was insane. It was a lot of stuff. Like, that's just kind of how that goes. I don't know if people's perception is that you just show up and interview and that's all you do when you're interviewing to be the third most important person in an organizational structure, but it has to be more in depth by that. I think every team does it different ways, but this is how the Browns do it. And given that the Browns operate in a very specific way, I don't have a problem with them being very specific about what they're asking for out of their candidates. Because what you don't want if you're Andrew Berry is to hire somebody who does not buy in, right? And you did not discover that during the interview process. Say what you want about this process. Anybody willing to do all this shit to take the Browns job, they want that fucking job, right? They have bought in to the way that the Browns operate, and they are going to play ball. You're not going to hear about a power struggle. You're not going to hear about internal disagreements or any kind of dysfunction. They have laid out clearly how this is going to go, what the expectations are, and that has been communicated, and the person taking the job has thoroughly accepted that. That avoids a lot of dysfunction. Again, I've watched the Browns do it the other way, where they're not very thorough. They're just interviewing off vibes, and they hire off vibes, and they end up with power struggles and all these things that they sit around and go, oh man, I wish we could have found that out during the interview process, because they weren't thorough enough. Now, does this guarantee that the hire is going to be good? No. But hopefully it makes it more likely that the results are better. We're going to continue on talking about this clip, but first let me thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper.
Browns organization operates.
Sure.
Paul
Okay.
DePodesta got there 10 years ago. He built out a massive data and analytics department. Those people have a strong voice in everything that the Browns do. There's a lot of time that is consumed once you're on the job with those conversations. And so the interview process is kind of a preview of that. So we'll see what direction their search goes.
Sure.
Again, Grant Udinski, Nate Shieldhouse, two big brain dudes who, again, happen to be tall, thin guys.
Nice.
They both are in the mix. Udinski's there now. Shieldhouse expected to interview on Monday. If it's not one of those two, then the other candidates that we know of as of right now are Jim Schwartz, who's the defensive coordinator, who they want to keep regardless, and Todd Monken, who does not fit in any of the categories that I just mentioned, other than he's a very intelligent guy who's run successful offenses in the NFL. I would tell you, Rich, the sense is the Browns are very intrigued by the Udinski and Shieldhouse possibilities, because they're both guys who are, Grant just turned 30. He's in his first year as the Jaguars OC, but he's unbelievably brilliant. Shieldhouse is in his mid-30s, was at Iowa State most recently with the Rams. Those guys fit the pattern. If ultimately the Browns on their scorecards that they collect do not decide that those guys are the best candidates, then the belief within the league is the default would be Jim Schwartz. Then you're trying to figure out, all right, well, now what do you do on offense to pair him? Who is willing to take that offensive coordinator job? There's just a lot of steps in the process, Rich, but the Browns, this is not new. They have done this for a long time, and it's just, as one high-powered coaching agent said to me the other day when we were going through the list of all the openings, the Browns are the Browns. Their process is different than everyone else's, and we'll see where it leads them this time. I would just say this. The Browns...
I feel like the reactions to this are less about what the Browns are specifically doing with the process of the hiring, and more people being upset that the Browns are organization that does care about analytics, that does care about data. Now, some of this is just like straight up, people not understanding how the league works, because the reality is all 32 teams are data driven at this point. All 32 teams have analytic departments. All 32 teams heavily listen to their analytic departments. There's not an analytic free, free ranged team in the NFL. And when you really look at what analytics means, it's just data. It's just another name for data, like data-driven decision-making. And you know what data-driven decision-making is? What another word for data-driven decision-making is? It's just informed decision-making, right? Just go back to 10 years ago, to 100 years ago. If you want to make a decision, you would look at the information that you have available to you and use that information to make a good decision. Now, if you make that same decision with that same process today, it's a analytically driven decision. It's just data. That's all analytics is. It's information and it's data. They are doing these things because they want data to be able to make a better judgment of who's right for the job and who's not right for the job. I don't think that's a bad thing, especially when this is a team that is willing to hire an inexperienced coach to be head coach of the team, right? Because they want to get ahead of the curve, and they think, hey, this guy might be a hot candidate in a year or two. Let's hire him now. Well, if you're going to do that, you want data. Like, I would not feel comfortable about the Browns hiring a 30-year-old head coach or a Nate Shieldhouse, who only has 3 years of NFL experience, if they weren't this thorough about their interview process, right? Like, if you're going to be open to hiring guys this young, then yeah, I want them to give them as much information as possible. Do the fucking personality test, do the assessment, do the questionnaires, do the fucking reports. You're young, you could do it. It's not that hard. And let's also stop acting like it's so goddamn hard to write a report. Okay? Like, people acting like the Browns are just forcing somebody to walk through heaven and earth on their knees through glass because they got to write a 3-page fucking essay. Ooh. Used to do those in college in like 2 days. 2 days. I graduated magna cum laude. So, you know what I mean? Like, what are we tripping about? Like, if you're a grown man in a professional organization, you should be able to put together a 3-page essay. If you cannot put together a 3-page essay, then maybe you should not be the head coach and we just discovered something. Like, I don't think this is a bad thing, man. The more I think about it, the more I'm for it. Like, yeah, why should getting the third highest ranking position in an organization be easy? If you are trying to be CEO or COO or CFO of a big company, you would have to jump through a lot of hoops in the interview process. You would have to fly different places, travel different places, meet different people, meet different clients, shake a bunch of hands. It's like a month-long process to get one of those jobs. And that's if it's shortened. You know what I mean? Like, just to get one of those jobs, like that's a very long process. Why would a job to be the third highest ranking guy in an organization about football require less? Like, maybe the traditional way of doing things doesn't ask enough out of head coaches before you hire them. And hell, look, I've watched this team hire plenty of dud head coaches the traditional way. You know what I mean? Like, the Browns' history as a franchise is no advertisement for the traditional way of doing things. Because this team has done things the traditional way. The only time they've had a coach who's had any level of like recognized success is when they hired Kevin Stefanski. And they used this process to hire Kevin Stefanski. Don't see the big problem. Don't see the big problem. Like, whatever process got you Hugh Jackson, I never want to do that again. Right? And apparently that was a vibes-driven process because Jimmy Haslam just said, I wanted to hire Hugh Jackson. Or whatever process Got your Eric Mangini. Y'all remember Eric Mangini? Robert Chazinski? You know what I mean? Like, we've hired a bunch of terrible coaches before the traditional way. Why is this bad? You know what I mean? Like, I saw somebody, they were talking about this, and they were like, well, the Browns are just asking too much for somebody for this job. No, they're not. They're not asking too much. Are you kidding me? I think you should ask a lot about somebody you're asking to be one of the most important, the most front-facing person in the organization. Like, think about it. Until you get a quarterback, the most front-facing person in your organization is the head coach. That's who talks to the media the most. That's who is on TV representing the organization the most. That's who's the face of every decision you make on the field. That's who has to speak for every decision and answer for every decision that the organization makes. It's one of the most important hires that you're going to make, and the Browns are being shat on because they want to be thorough. Right, we're actually saying the Browns should require less for their job. Like, part of me thinks this goes back to, like, people just want the Browns to stay mediocre, and anytime the Browns try to do anything that demonstrates that they have ambitions past mediocre, people get pissed off. And again, this even happens with Browns fans. Like, I think this is part of that. Like, the Browns are demonstrating right now that they have a high standard for this job, and that they have specific requirements that they demand be filled before they give this job to anybody. And people are like, how dare the Browns think that they should have that high of a standard? We should just hire anybody. We should just hire General Slop. Like, that's what people just want us to do. They would be more happy with the organization if we went into this head coach search blindfolded with a fucking arrow in our chair and just spun around until we landed on somebody roulette style. Just like, yeah, that's the new Browns coach. People would be more happy with the Browns if they did that, because then at least the Browns know their place. But boy, let the Browns feel like they have high standards or not even high standards, specific standards, because they know what they want to do as an organization, and everybody gets pissed off. I don't really see the problem here. You know what I mean? I'm willing to try it. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm not saying this is a perfect process. It's going to work out 100% of the time, but I'm willing to try it because we've done it the old way a lot, and it's worked out not many times. Only coach we've ever had that's won the Coach of the Year got hired through this kind of a process. So let's keep doing, let's be process focused. This is what I've been wanting them to do. I have no problem with this. I can see how people could hear it initially, have a knee-jerk reaction to it, but really think about what we're making fun of the Browns for. We're making fun of the Browns for being specific and wanting to hire somebody who is willing to take a very specific role. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.